A thread by Soul War. General Flynn has been unchained. In Greek mythology, Prometheus the Titan gave humanity fire, and for that, Zeus chained him to a lonely rock and sent an eagle once a day to devour his liver, which grew back every night. Hercules eventually freed Prometheus from his torment. Prometheus suffered for helping the human race civilize itself via fire. General Flynn has suffered, along with his family, for serving our country in an honest and forthright manner. When all others engaged in happy talk to make a feckless Obama look good, Flynn refused. He did not engage in happy talk regarding Obama's failures in Iraq and in the damage Obama was causing in his pursuit of his insane Iran deal. Obama, a petty and vengeful rogue president, soon fired Flynn as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. Obama made moves preparing for the inevitable Hillary presidency, including bogus and contrived charges, sound familiar, that they would use to take Donald Trump out of politics for good. Obama's White House was illegally spying on hundreds of Americans trying to ram through the Iran deal. They needed to make sure no populist outsider could ever emerge to threaten their DC swamplands again. And then they fumbled the cheat in 2016. That's right. All the indicators are they had set up to steal 2016, but just didn't cheat enough and got caught unprepared. Obama was forced to hand the presidency over to Trump. But here's the thing. Even by that time, the Democrats had bought their own BS and propaganda about Trump. Trump's carefully created persona is a strategy he employs. They cannot help themselves. They see him as a buffoon. At that meeting, Obama took the buffoon aside and told him in confidence, whatever you do, don't bring Flynn into the White House. Obama told the dolt that Flynn was bad news. The actual reason Obama didn't want General Flynn anywhere near the White House is because Flynn is a razor. The former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and a 33-year career military spook would figure out almost immediately what Obama and company had been doing, where he allowed access to White House communications and personnel as the incoming national security advisor. So this had to be prevented at all costs. Trump wasn't fooled by Obama's entreaty, and he tagged Flynn as the national security advisor, confirming the cabal's worst fears. Understand, all of them knew they're spying on Americans either from outside FISA courts or by defrauding those courts was criminally actionable. Flynn had to be stopped somehow. Enter David Ignatius from the Washington Post. They came up with a rudimentary plan. Create a cloud of suspicion via the mainstream media, then have their operatives in the FBI go and quote unquote investigate those suspicions to open a door for a political prosecution. Read persecution. Obama set up Flynn by initiating a contrived incident with the Russians by introducing sanctions and expelling 35 Russian diplomats and their families. Flynn had already touched base with Russian Ambassador Kislyak several times previously as the incoming national security advisor, as the press howled. They were setting up that very necessary cloud of suspicion for their hatchet job of Flynn. Eventually, even the press was forced to admit that Flynn was just doing his job. Realizing that Flynn wasn't going to bow out under pressure from the mainstream media, Obama did the sanctions. Here's the problem. When the FBI operatives showed up to entrap Flynn, he was too smart for them. He gave them nothing actionable. So they floundered for over 2 months as the pressure to get Flynn the fuck out of there increased from the seventh floor and the White House. They had nothing. They were about to close their BS, politically contrived case and admit defeat when Agent Struck suddenly called in and said, "Don't close it." Then he and his lover and FBI lawyer, Lisa Page, edited the only official record of the Flynn interview, a report called a 302. That's right. The FBI does not audio record their interviews. The only official record of what happens in an interview is a completely subjective report by an FBI agent. Agent Joseph Pientka filed that original report months later, desperate to get Flynn. Struck and Page edited it to turn a forthright and patriotic American hero with nothing but the best intentions towards serving the nation faithfully into a criminal. First, Struck edited the 302. Dissatisfied with her Peters edit, Lisa Page edited it further. Then they charged Flynn. But these two conniving lovebirds got the timeline wrong. Here's the New York Times attempting to cover for their blunder. From the New York Times timeline, what we now know about Flynn's phone calls with Russia. You see, the now infamous call that Flynn supposedly lied about happened the morning of the 28th. Obama's sanctions weren't announced until that afternoon. General Flynn is accused of lying to the FBI about discussing the sanctions with Ambassador Kislyak. So, if Flynn's crime is that he lied, he did discuss the sanctions. How could he? They hadn't happened yet. And neither man knew they were coming. The original 302 would prove a setup. When Sidney Powell got her hands on all the exculpatory evidence the FBI had been hiding, one document was never made available. The original 302. We are told it was deleted. Gosh, what a shock! When I think of what's been done to Flynn and his family, I'm extremely angry. There is a special place in hell for people like Struck, McCabe, and Obama, who casually sacrifice the lives of other people for their ambitions or to cover up their crimes. There's an even deeper place for souls like Judge Sullivan, a trusted officer of the court. Shame. Well, President Trump timed this pardon perfectly. If you've followed me over the years, this has played out. You know I've always said I wanted full exoneration for Michael Flynn, but this is a war for the soul of the nation. Right, CCP Joe? That slogan has got to be Judas Goats. With one carefully timed act, the president freed Flynn to speak, while at the same time freeing up Sidney Powell to pursue her lawsuits against the digital election fraud of not only November 2020, but all provable cases from years gone by. Georgia and Michigan are just the beginning. Did you know the Kraken is a nickname given to a cyber warfare unit and software suite used by the United States military to identify threats not just on a battlefield, but threats to national security and defense? Keyword surveillance. From Army.mil, Kraken provides needed intelligence force protection at NIE. Like Prometheus, Powell and Flynn are now unchained and free to pursue their goals. The restoration of our republic from the manifest threats that have imperiled it, and whose threats had only grown before the Trump presidency. That threat has reached its zenith. Now, like Icarus, our enemies, foreign and domestic, shall fall to earth in a Homeric crash of their fortunes. Mostly in the shadows, a clash of titans has occurred, and the righteous did prevail. All that remains is to give the heralds of our foes, their sycophants and slaves, the bad news. Trump wins. Yup. They'll howl, shriek, and caterwaul. It's a coup! And no one will give a single solitary damn. The mainstream media are shattering before our eyes as the DC Democrats hide under their beds. They know what's coming. They've realized who Trump is. The Silicon Valley overlords are oblivious. I will take particular relish in what President Trump is going to do to them. They thought they were the masters of the universe. All they actually were rich and amoral America haters, and their bar tab is on the way. I anticipate most of this playing out in the next 2 weeks. You may actually see members of the media try to physically attack our president before January. They and their social media allies thought they had superpowers when they were, in fact, just criminals going up against a real superhero. I never doubted him. All is well. To support the works of Brent Cates, donate any amount at paypal.me/Brent Cates, and also check out the Americana Rising Teespring store, link in the thread.